think about it, a family crisis, the death of a loved one. But if you don't think about emergencies before they happen, the situation can be that much worse when it does happen. Well, here to talk about planning for the future is attorney Howard Krooks. He specializes in elder law and trusts and estates. Thanks so much for being with us.
Hi.
You know, like we said, no one really wants to have to think about wills, getting sick, that kind of thing. But, you know, and you think, well, we don't have to think about it till we're older. As we saw with 9/11, you had so many young couples, so many young women, widowed people who, they'd just been married, so they didn't have a will yet. So you need to start right away.
Yeah, I think 9/11 was a wake-up call for a lot of people. We had a lot of people come into my office who realized that while hopefully nothing on the scale of 9/11 would happen again, there are everyday tragedies that we all have to plan for. And it is difficult. Human nature says this is not going to happen to me, but I think people realize that it can happen to you, and if you plan properly, you can go a long way towards preserving your family's assets.
What's one of the most important things that you should do when you start planning? Like, what's number one on the list?
Well, I think number one on the list is decide to act, to do something. But beyond that, one of the things that we always recommend our clients do is compile a list or an information sheet that is complete with your brokers, other professional advisors, investment advisors, doctors that you go to regularly, where can your family find your assets, what insurance policies do you have a safe deposit box, etc., all in one place so that people can find this on a very quick basis if they need to.
Well, you know, I had heard a story just yesterday. You're talking about when you get all these things together, that it's important to not just have it in a computer program. There were, from what I understand, there were a bunch of women in Greenwich, Connecticut, actually, whose husbands were killed in 9/11. And all of their financial planning, their estate planning information was on programs in the laptop computers, and those laptop computers were with the husbands that day on 9/11, so they had no idea where anything was, what they had.
See, this goes right back to what you said earlier, which is people maybe don't want to talk about these things. While the husbands had everything prepared, they didn't discuss it with their spouse. And getting people and families to discuss these things openly and honestly is probably one of the, if I can hammer home a point today, it would be to open up the lines of communications and say, even though we don't want these things to happen, it's okay to talk about them, because if and when they do, the families are going to be in a much better situation. They're going to be in a much better position to then deal with the crisis when it hits.
Sure. Now, you say there are 4 documents that every adult should have, and we're not just talking about money, though. I mean, we're talking about things like, if I'm in an accident and I'm in a coma, do I want to stay hooked up, or do I want my family to pull the plug, kind of thing?
And if that should happen, God forbid, you know, who's going to make the decisions for you? Have you thought about that? Have you discussed your decision-making with the agent that you appoint in your healthcare proxy, so that the proper decisions can be carried out when you're no longer in a position to communicate your wishes with respect to medical treatment? The 4 documents that you refer to are a healthcare proxy, a living will, a durable power of attorney, and a last will and testament. Now, I do elder law, so I deal a lot with the elderly and disabled, but this advice is for anybody listening today. If you have a young couple, they've just gotten married and they're thinking about having kids, when you have kids, it's usually a big impetus to go and get your will done, because you want to designate who would become the guardian of your children should anything happen to the 2 parents. So there's no age restriction on this planning, and we all know that accidents and tragedies happen at all ages, so that if somebody needs to make medical decisions for you because you're in a coma in a hospital as a result of an automobile accident, we know that could happen in your 20s or 30s. There are diseases such as MS, which people get afflicted with, again, in their 30s and 40s. So there's no age at which you know, you can say, well, I'm only 20 or 30. I don't really need to think about these issues until I'm 50 or 60. At every stage of life, there's a good reason to do the planning and to have these documents in place.
And something else that's interesting, a lot of people don't know, when you talk about all this planning, and the first thing you think about is, you know, maybe financial planning. So, okay, well, I'll go to a financial advisor, but there are other things that you need to plan for, like living wills, that a financial planner can't do. That is something only an attorney can do. Is that right? right?
I would think so. I mean, if you have a very astute financial planner, they may let you know that there are other considerations that you should be looking into. But the financial planner's perspective, if you think about it, is to plan for your finances and to make sure that you're achieving the rate of return that you desire to achieve, that you have proper asset allocation, but probably isn't going to go much beyond that. And these considerations are very important.
Sure. Now, one more time, those 4 documents, just to reiterate it and drive the point home.
Let me just briefly describe each one. There's the last will and testament, which governs the disposition of your assets upon your death.
Sure.
There's a durable power of attorney, wherein you appoint an agent to make financial decisions for you while you're alive. There's a healthcare proxy. This is an agent who will make medical decisions for you while you're alive. And a living will, where you give the agent more direction about whether you wish to receive or not receive end-of-life medical care.
And when you say agent, it's, it could be your mother, your father, your husband, whatever.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Howard, thank you so much. Really important, great advice.
My pleasure.
Okay.